Just the other week, came the surprising news that director Quentin Tarantino had abandoned what was intended to be his 10th and final film, The Movie Critic. In another staggering twist, I can reveal what is likely to replace that project as his directorial swan song. A horror sequel to Tommy Wiseau's cult classic, The Room. Although this news might seem like a completely left-field choice for the auteur, die-hard fans of Tarantino's will remember that he first pitched this idea a while back on fellow film director Eli Roth's podcast. Quentin and his friend had been discussing their favorite horror films when the subject of guilty pleasures sprang up. This led into the topic of unlikely sequels, with Eli Roth half-jokingly expressing his desire to make a follow-up to Troll 2, entitled Return to Nilbog. At this point, Tarantino outlined a plot for The Room Part 2, which, my source tells me, is pretty close to the story that he's currently pitching to studios. For those of you who don't know, The Room is a San Francisco set drama, centered around a love triangle. Johnny, played by writer-director Tommy Wiseau, is engaged to Lisa, who is cheating on him with his best friend, Mark. This betrayal culminates in Johnny killing himself with a gun in his and Lisa's bedroom. The film ends with Lisa, Mark, and creepy neighbor, Denny, weeping over his lifeless body. Tarantino stated on the podcast that such is the general bizarreness of Tommy Wiseau's performance, that a sequel could open with Johnny simply sitting back up, shrugging off what should have been a fatal injury, and launching himself at the trio, zombie style. In its present form, Tarantino's script apparently begins with a recreation of the original's climactic scene. I am told that he is adamant that the four leads reprise their roles for his iteration, regardless of the 20-year gap between films and the actors' collective lack of bankability. This, allegedly, is making it difficult to secure funding for the project, as studios are uniform in stating their preference for the casting of some of his once-upon-a-time in Hollywood actors, notably Austin Butler, Brad Pitt and Margot Robbie. If Quentin gets his way, his film's opening scene would have the Denny character sobbing over the seemingly dead Johnny, again played by Tommy Wiseau. The Mark and Lisa characters have left the two alone. Denny then unwittingly summons dark forces by pledging his soul for Johnny's return. Johnny's fingers twitch. Before Denny can rejoice, the reanimated Johnny lunges at him, nearly decapitating the younger man with his teeth. When Mark and Lisa return to investigate the commotion, Johnny has already fled through the bedroom window. The dapper ghoul prowls the streets of San Francisco for a period, before returning to his former apartment, where Lisa frets by herself. He declares his love for her, and she attempts to reciprocate, but Johnny is awake to her insincerity, and he devours her. This leads to Johnny rampaging through the city in search of his one-time friend, Mark, and turning those whom he encounters into subordinate monsters. From what I've heard, The Movie Critic was set to be a low-key, introspective affair. Quentin is said to have gotten cold feet in regards to such a small-scale piece being his last ever film. The Room Part 2 would be an altogether grander and more exhilarating moviegoing experience, with set pieces and gory visuals topping anything that Tarantino has hitherto brought to the screen. There's even a rumor that this movie would connect back to his most celebrated film, Pulp Fiction, with the inclusion of Samuel L. Jackson as Jules Winfield, tying up that character's story. I would be delighted if Quentin finishes his directorial career with a fun, violent, apocalyptic homage to Dawn of the Dead, a film in which he falsely claimed to be an extra when starting out as an actor. That's my take. But how about you, Peggy Sue?
Having never watched The Room, and being a big Tarantino fan, I find this rumor to be both highly peculiar and very intriguing. The only thing I'd ever heard about The Room is its legendary awfulness. A mega-budget, blood-soaked sequel to a dreadful melodrama as your final film is exactly what a true maverick would come up with. Fart impeccable blend of silly and awesome is what makes Quentin's films so immensely rewatchable. I just hope that the pressure of producing the perfect last film doesn't mean that he procrastinates forever.
Yes. And a merging of the Tarantino-verse with that of a singular entity such as Tommy Wiseau would certainly make for a bold finale. Time will tell if such a curiosity ever comes to be.